This is Bar Crawl Radio Podcast, recording at Gephardt's Beer Culture Bar on West 72nd Street. Alan and I feel that the best conversations happen at your neighborhood bar.
Today, we're talking about the protests going on in Hong Kong over the heavy-handedness of the Hong Kong leadership controlled by the People's Republic of China, otherwise known as China.
China.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or PRC.
PRC sometimes,
Yeah.
right?
We will be talking with Ken Su, a member of New York for Hong Kong, a local who supports democracy for Hong Kong, including universal suffrage and genuine election reform.
We'll be talking about the history of Hong Kong as a political and social entity, the effects of recent protests on the position of Hong Kong in relation to the PRC, or as we said, China, and how all of this is affecting the lives of the Hong Kong expats living here in New York City. Alina Larson, PRC's world-traveling co-producer, will talk about her recent visit to Hong Kong and her conversations with protesters in that city.
Okay, enough for the introduction. Here we go.
That's Wade Ripka of the Eastern Blockheads. He introduces all Bar Crawl Radio. Not all of them, every other one he introduces.
Right, well, no, he introduces the other one too, but it's different music.
It's different,
It's
yeah.
Wade
but
Ripka's music.
But it's Wade Ripka.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Ken Su is with us today at Gephardt's Beer Culture Bar. He is an American Hong Konger working in the financial industry while he volunteers for NY4HK. That's New Yorkers for Hong Kong.
Okay, so do you
that
say
right?
Hong Konger? Is that what you
New
say?
Yorkers for Hong Kongers?
New Yorkers for Hong Kong.
For
New
Hong
Yorkers
Kong.
for Hong Kong.
Hong Kongers
You said
are
he's
the
an
people.
American Hong Konger. I was
Yeah,
just
yes.
curious what that is.
I know, I came across the term Hong Konger.
You did?
It's actually a term that we are still debating whether it should be Hong Kongese or the Hong Kongers.
All right.
There's
okay,
a space
okay.
in between, but
Okay.
And
Got
I've
it,
been,
got
I've been
it.
trying to come up with a name for people who are live in this country, and because we call ourselves American,
But Canadians are
but
Americans.
Canadians are American, and Mexicans are American.
Yeah.
Right.
People, everyone in South America is American.
It's almost like
So
we,
I'm
you
coming
know,
up with
we co-opted
we're United
the whole
Statesians.
continent.
That's true.
United Statesites.
but we have the American Chinese and American Hong Kongers.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Well, that,
yeah,
that, that, that makes more sense. So to continue, NY4HK is a social political organization that supports Hong Kong democratic movements. NY4HK was established in 2014 during the Hong Kong Umbrella Movement and has hosted many rallies and events to raise Americans' awareness of Hong Kongers' fight for freedom and democracy.
Ken, welcome to Bar Crawl Radio.
Thank you for inviting me.
You're welcome. Were you born in Hong Kong?
Yes,
And when did you come to the United States?
in the mid-90s,
Okay, all right.
when Clinton was the president.
You were a baby.
So why did your parents?
Let's just put it that way.
Okay.
All right. We're not. Yeah. So why did your parents come here? Was it a business, or you came here as a child?
Correct. Well, I came here actually was as a middle school student, let's just say. There's a wave of Hong Kongers that migrate to other countries, especially Western countries like United States, Canada, and Australia, New Zealand.
And these are places that Hong Kongers generally go to in the world if they're not staying in Hong Kong.
Correct, because these are English-speaking countries.
Got it.
And that's a second language for Hong Kongers, right?
Right.
You can basically see a lot of Hong Kongers, especially before the handover of Hong Kong from Britain to China, that the first language obviously is our mother language, which is Cantonese. Then the second language is often English over Mandarin. That Mandarin is the official language of China, as you know. But most of us receive the education that is a bilingual education since we are in kindergarten, basically.
In Cantonese.
Cantonese
So-
and English.
And
And
English. Right,
and
right,
English.
no, yeah.
Which
Right.
is different than if you were brought up in China, you would not necessarily be speaking English.
Yeah,
Right.
that's
but,
correct.
But it's a unique part of being a Hong Konger or a Hong Kongite. Did you say?
Hong Kongers.
Okay, we're going to
Hong
stick with
Konger.
that for this
Right.
show. Just curious, Taiwanese speak Mandarin, though, probably.
They
No?
do.
They do.
They do.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'd like to learn a little bit more for our listeners and for ourselves is a bit of the history of Hong Kong. I mean, we've heard a lot of stuff is going on now in Hong Kong with the protests, and we'll get to that. But we want to kind of go back and how did Hong Kong get to where it is? It's basically an island.
Let's just say that Hong Kong has an island called Hong Kong Island, but the territory of Hong Kong is more than just the island.
Okay.
There's an island, many islands around, but also a part that is adjacent to China, right? Think of that as more like a peninsula is the majority of the area. But it is a
And it's in
region,
the south part of China.
southern part of China, correct? And that is adjacent to the Guangdong or the Canton province of China, one of the most populous province in the country.
Right.
And so Hong Kong was a fishing village with like not too many people, maybe a few thousand people. Even during the Qing Dynasty, although it's a place that has been populated by humans probably in at the turn of the millennium maybe or before Tong Song Dynasty. However, China Qing Dynasty back then, before in the 19th century they lost the Opium War to the Britons, and
And that Opium
They
War
have
thing,
to-
that's a whole other story.
whole other story. Let's just say the Qing Dynasty lost, and they have to concede by giving a harbor for the British people. So there were 3 rounds of secession from China, and that becomes the entire map of Hong Kong as of today.
Right.
But you're right, in the beginning it's just the Hong Kong island, but then it keeps going further up north into the Chinese territory,
Right.
the Qing Dynasty territory.
And so the British took over, and I looked this up in 1842, and then they continued to rule Hong Kong area up until World War II, and then Japan took it over for a few years,
Correct.
and then as we all know, Japan lost, and it went back to British rule.
Right.
And at that point, what was the how did Hong Kong develop? How did it become this commercial center, financial commercial center that it is now?
I think it's a combination of the nature of Chinese people with the grit and the willingness to work hard and get things done. And at the meantime, it is also being governed by the rule of law with a just and a fair judicial system, the British common law system. And the combination of both will get you the best of every society. And the Hong Kong used to be, again, as a small fishing village with some trade ports and stuff back in the early 20th century. But the economy really started booming when the communists took over the mainland China, and they basically isolated its own country, and with the only slight opening, which is being Hong Kong. So it
And you say slight
situates
opening. This is a slight opening to the rest of the world's economy?
for the correct.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of trading across the border. Things have to go through Hong Kong essentially. So that sort of benefits Hong Kong as well.
And benefits China.
In a way, but has to go through Hong Kong. So Hong Kong basically is developed as an import-export business. That was the biggest source of income, and then
Wow.
eventually becomes now the 3rd biggest financial center of the world and the freest economy of the world as
Wow.
well. And a lot of that, and the economic boom actually started in the early 70s when the British government really fought hard against corruption. So that really turned things around. In my opinion, that is Sir McLeod is one of the best governor of Hong Kong.
And who was that?
McLeod?
The
Yeah.
governor now.
No, the British.
The British
colony governor of Hong
colonial
Kong.
governor.
Got
Yeah,
it. got it.
he ruled for about 10 years, I believe, and most of the policies are pro Hong Kong people. It wasn't biased towards the British government at all, and that really exemplifies, what a good government, how that can be run.
Okay.
And yeah,
But in 1997, the Brits left, and they had an agreement with China about leaving. And I don't want to get into the history of their leaving.
Well, why did they leave, though?
All right. Okay.
well,
Fine. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you were telling the story.
All right.
well, as China, after the whole Cultural Revolution madness, they decided to go into capitalism and go into that direction. The Western world starts to open up to China, starting with Richard Nixon, and then later on Margaret Thatcher and everybody. So Deng Xiaoping back then basically said that we need to unify China, and Hong Kong is China's territory, and also there is a big part of Hong Kong called the New Territories. It's not permanently seceded to Great Britain. It is actually running under a 99 years lease, and the lease is up. It's going to end at the year 1997, right? 1997. So then the negotiations started around maybe 82, and then they finalized in 1984, saying that Deng Xiaoping basically said sovereignty is out of the question, has to be China, but we can talk about anything else. So this is why we developed this agreement called the One Country, Two Systems,
systems,
a
yeah.
treaty, where, yes, when it comes to sovereignty and the protection of land, it's China's authority under Hong Kong, but Hong Kong still should have its own judicial system and financial system as well. And basically, Hong Kongers deserve to have a firewall, a judicial firewall against the rest of China, because both the British and the Western world, and even Deng Xiaoping himself know that Hong Kong has been running as its own area for even longer than not just the mainland China under PRC, but also the Taiwanese government, which is the Republic of China.
And that
Yeah.
complicates the story even more.
So he realizes that it's going to take at least 50 years for the two sides to really, to reconcile and trying to be more like the same type of people. So they created a buffer of so-called 50 years no change, in a sense saying that we're going to make sure the one country, two system method is going to run for at least 50 years, and then we can talk about the future after the 50 year.
Yeah, and I do want to get to that, because that 50-year agreement that started in 1997 is up in 2047.
Time goes by fast.
Certainly in your lifetime, that's going to happen. And I do want to talk about that, because it seems like there is some push to make that kind of concretize that change now. But I don't want to get to it right away. Okay, we will get to it. But go on.
But you see, the interesting point is that's why I say a lot of Hong Kongers, maybe families of the elite, or at least the ones that have savings or being able to have the ability to move overseas, they choose to leave before 97 because of their disbelief of the mainland Chinese government, how the communists run the country. They have seen how 1989 Tiananmen massacre works. They lost a lot of faith in the government. So they basically express their concerns by just leaving the country.
Right, and so there was
Like
a
my
lot,
family.
Yeah, like your
Right,
family.
right.
And that's about the time that they left.
Yeah,
About
95.
at
In
that
the
time,
90s,
yeah.
yeah.
Right.
So Ken, Hong Kong is a commercial and investment hub of that area of the world. How important is Hong Kong to Chinese trade?
Very important. More important than Chinese people would believe, because it is the only place where China can turn assets into US dollars and rate US dollars debts. You can't, and being a free economy is that you can invest capital and take it away as you wish, but you can't really do that with China. And one of the most important things is that the importance of being a world financial center is that you have to have a free society, at the same time a fair judicial system, right? And this is how you can attract capital from the rest of the world.
You need some stability to have business.
More than just stability, but the fact that I know that when I invest money in this place, I should be able to enjoy the money without being confiscated by the government or being
Yes.
press charges that is unfair against the company or to myself personally, right? So
That's fundamental.
that's
I would think.
fundamental. Without freedom, there's nothing.
Right. Well, freedom
Basically.
with rules about
Correct.
how it runs and how it's going to run into the future.
Right, and you can check all the statistics in terms of the rule of law standard. China is way behind Hong Kong on that front, and so this is exactly what sparks the whole revolution that is happening this year, which is the extradition law, basically saying that we are going to remove the firewall, the judicial firewall that Hong Kongers have been enjoying since '97. Basically, the Chinese rule is now going to overtake the rest of the Hong Kong judicial system, and that is what is so scary about this.
That's the big fear now.
It's the big fear.
Of course.
Yeah.
They're chipping away.
Right. Right.
It's
So-
one country, 1.5 system,
Right.
or
right.
one system.
And then
Yeah.
one quarter system. And
Yeah,
then-
exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
their idea, I would think. I mean, I don't know. So, do you travel to Hong Kong, Ken?
Yeah, from time to time.
And what's life like there? What's life like for the most people?
There definitely, you can see a change of the sentiments since the transfer of sovereignty back in '97. Initially, I think people still have a lot of hope, saying that, you know what, we finally feeling like I'm part of the country. China is getting stronger and stronger year by year. They look to be more open to economy and trading. And then things got a little bit sour right? When you have these bad policies that happens around 2003, so people start to have some disbelief of China. Then it gets better again when it comes to the Beijing Olympics and seeing how Lehman Brothers causing all the global financial system collapsing while China sort of staying relatively strong. That is when Hong Kongers feel that they belong to China. They recognize themselves as Chinese. The peak probably is heading around 2008, 2009 timeframe. And then when the umbrella movement, sort of started in 2014, this is going way downhill since then. So there's a lot of disbelief in the government. There's the sentiment of the people in Hong Kong are quite angry with the policies. They start to realize that for the past more than 5 years or so, most of the policies that they make have been leaning towards benefiting Beijing, benefiting towards the elites of the society. And this is really pissing off a lot of people. And
Right.
this is why they're starting to realize, what, perhaps it was right that we really should get universal suffrage. We need a true democracy in Hong Kong because there's no way for them to oppose the government actions if everyone's being handpicked by the government.
So
Like
we
Beijing
want to
government,
we want to move on to the protests and exactly what they mean and what's happening. But I still wondered what it like to even scroll back to before you left. What was it like before 1997, before the 1990s when your family left? What was it like in Hong Kong?
I would say this: the core value of Hong Kong people before '97 was about making money, work hard, and don't worry too much about politics because there's not much to worry about.
Sounds very American.
Well, even less in that sense. The participation in democracy, because we do have some voting going on for the Legislative Council and whatnot, but people are in general indifferent to the politics, which is a mistake in my opinion at this point when we look back in history. But it's a good thing, right? It's a luxury that we don't have anymore in Hong Kong because we can't just focus on business and assuming everything is just fine. When the rules and the policies are leaning towards the elites, something is wrong, and inequality is getting worse and worse.
And the youth woke up.
The youth have to wake up because
Right.
they realize if you factor in the rise of the real estate prices, Hong Kong university graduates as of now, compared to their parents like 30 years ago, is in effect only 25% of how much their parents are making. If you factor in the real estate prices, they have to basically work 20 years without spending any money on food transportation to be able to buy a 500 square feet huge apartment they call.
Right.
This is, you think New York is extreme? Think of Hong Kong. And the inequality is insane over there. If you look at the Gini index, in the top of the list is always these African countries and maybe Caribbean countries, and suddenly Hong Kong pops up
Wow.
right there. The inequality, usually, it's true about anything, right? When there is inequality, there will be a revolution or some
And
kind
yet,
of
and yet
fight
people
back
are
against
people are
government.
making money there.
But who?
Yeah, but who?
There's a
and-
handful of people living up in the mountains with the huge mansions. Obviously, the uber rich, you have the most number of billionaires in any cities, and Hong Kong have the most number of skyscraper, way more than New York. If you look at the stats,
Amazing,
yes.
amazing.
But
So-
the people don't benefit from it.
yeah,
Yeah.
Even though money's being produced there, money and wealth is being produced there.
Yeah.
So there have been many protests since starting with the umbrella movement. Going back to
2014.
2012, about
2014.
2014. Okay.
Yeah.
But have the round of street protests, and it's been rounds of street protests over the years, have they been getting more violent? Have they changed? Has the message changed, or is it pretty much what it always had been?
It is a very good question, actually. Hong Kongers have protests, let's just say even during the British rule, but they are mostly one of the most peaceful protesters that you can find in the world. Marches, without any, even cursing, that you see on the streets, and the streets actually look cleaner after the march than before. That
And
is
that's
how
because of the protesters.
the protesters, yeah,
They clean up after themselves.
they clean up themselves, and even in the 2014, when they finally realized that maybe we should try to break some rules by occupying the streets, this is like an extreme thing for Hong Kongers back in 2014.
Right.
Unimaginable before that, right? So they would set up camps on the streets. They have their own libraries and they clean up bathrooms and leave things for people to use. And it's such a orderly community in the middle of the street in Hong Kong. And that's what not just the youngsters, but some young professionals after work, they would just sit down and join in the resistance movement. So that is what Hong Kong's protesters are used to be, or that's what they're known for the Western world. But this is also a failing strategy because it makes it very easy for the government to disband the group, and it actually failed after 79 days or so.
Right. I want to turn to Alina, who I didn't introduce directly before, and you had a question earlier. If you didn't hear a voice that sounded like Becky, it was Alina Larson. So you were in Hong Kong, and I think there were some questions you had to ask.
I do, yeah. It was such a learning experience for me because when I was there, I originally, only knew that it was about the extradition topic, but since then I've learned so much. But I just would love to hear from you. Why do you feel the mainland Chinese are so opposed to the Hong Kong protests? Is it the propaganda?
I think it's probably they are afraid that if Hong Kongers are to succeed to fight for what they have, which is freedom and democracy and human rights, then the mainland Chinese people will start asking for the same thing. And that ultimately is going to damage the profits of the mutual benefactors on the elite part of China. As you know, there's probably even a higher inequality going on down there if you have all the real numbers. So they're afraid because the ruling parties are the ones that are making a lot of money. Most of their relatives are actually living overseas or have overseas status. Xi Jinping himself, he allegedly have his family like with British citizenship. All in even
Really?
Hong Kong elites.
Wow.
They're not just they are not going to be willing to live in China. They're going to make money with China, but they're going to move the assets and families away when things start blowing up. So they love to keep the status quo. And the easiest way to keep the status quo is if people just focus on working and don't ask for freedom and democracy.
So,
Yes.
So what about that? What about, do you have a sense of how the mainland Chinese people feel about what's going on in Hong Kong? Do you have any sense?
Yeah, is there any way of getting a feel of those people?
I do. I would say this, right? First, I don't believe that if you talk about a particular country or its people, there's only one type of people. There's always diversity of opinions, right? And so I don't want to overly generalize everybody.
And that happened in
China.
2014 with the older generation being very upset with the younger generation for the protest. Wasn't there a kind of a rift?
Not entirely, but that is in general the sentiments. If you have to generalize that as well. But when you talk about China, right? Because I want to get back to that topic.
Yes.
I would say a lot of the mainland Chinese people, because they have a restricted source of news. Basically, all news are being scanned by the Chinese government, so they will only allow you to see what they want you to see. And since it is very difficult to hide away from all the protest action that is in Hong Kong, they will try to frame it as this is Hong Kongers fighting for independence, a separation from China. So once you use that as your headline, most of the mainland Chinese viewers will go crazy. But whoa, we're not going to do that. One China. Right? Hong Kong has to be part of China, no questions asked. But if you look at the 5 demands by the Hong Kong protesters, none of those 5 demands were about independence. Right? Independence is not the solution. What Hong Kongers are wanting right now are basically protecting its basic freedom that we always have, and also fighting for a true democracy. So these are the things that a lot of the mainland Chinese people don't get to hear, and that's the problem. But I do believe there is also a silent minority that is in mainland China.
We're in a bar, so we're going to hear yelling. Yeah.
Oh,
It happens.
That's good. So maybe there's a silent cry like what just heard.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
That they want to support the Hong Kongers. They sort of know what's going on because the older generation of China has gone through the Cultural Revolution and they are lucky enough to survive. But they also know that the repercussion will be huge if they were to speak up in mainland China. The cost for Hong Kongers right now to speak up against the government, maybe perhaps they get beat up or they get injured or locked up in the jails and whatnot. But in China, you lose your life. Your family may lose your life with you if you were to do that. So they are very afraid about speaking up over there, and they will allow maybe the younger generation to get brainwashed because as long as they remain safe and go on with daily lives, let them believe in the fake news. And that's what's going on in mostly in mainland China. But again, not everybody is like that, because this is why it's interesting when I host protests with Professor Anna Chang in New York. There are mainland Chinese people that will join us for the fight. They will be, of course, covering their face and the mask without trying to hide their identities, but they'll tell me, look, I'm from mainland. I know what's going on. I really want to support you.
Is that what the mask is about?
The mask, again, if from the angle of many Chinese viewers from mainland China to be like, well, you're wearing a mask because you're about to commit a crime. That's why you don't want to show your face. It's the opposite. We know what our opponents are capable to do once they have the facial recognition and try to, identify who I am and where I work, where I went to school.
Right.
So this is why people are wearing masks and the things to hide their face, because they know how brutal the opposition is. If this were to be a fight against maybe the American government, probably we don't need that.
A lot of the organizers from earlier on have been in prison already.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's getting worse and worse.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe we could turn and talk about the masks. Alina, you were in Hong Kong just recently, and you talked to several Hong Kongers
What did you see?
and protesters. What was it? What did you see when you were, with them?
May
These
I
young
add,
people,
May I
yeah.
add one question to Alina?
Yeah.
What is the time frame that you
I
worked
was
in
there
Hong
in
Kong?
August. Yeah.
Things have already escalated
They
since then.
have, haven't they?
That's
Yeah,
right.
that's what I've heard, exactly. So when I was there, the protests, it seemed like they were mostly happening on the weekends. The streets were cleared because it seemed like there were designated times when the protests were allowed to happen, and so they really cleared off and blocked off large avenues. And so, what I saw the day that I went was, like you were saying, it was mostly young people. Everyone was in black T-shirts. Most people had masks. Some people had hard hats, umbrellas. There were very few people with gas masks.
Right.
But as you were saying, everyone was
What
very
kind, what kind of
peaceful.
masks were there? Did you see?
Just like the medical masks.
Okay, all right.
But no
Yeah.
goggles? Because my
Not-
understanding is that the goggles
not
protect you
much.
from the tear gas.
I mean, I've seen the Guy Fawkes mask too. They
Yeah.
have that covers the whole face.
Right.
with-
Not too much.
not
too much.
not
But I
too-
mean, again, as you said, things have escalated, so I'm not sure if there's more need for that now.
Right.
Yeah.
But you did talk to some of the protesters. I think it was before they were actually going off to the protest.
I did, yeah.
And you asked about why they were wearing the mask, or they were going to wear the mask. And so I thought maybe we could play a little bit of
Great idea.
what their answer is. Okay, here we go.
You can see that some of the protesters wear the mask, so to protect themselves. Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
But you're not going to wear a mask.
I will, but I'm waiting my friend. So when I join the protest, I will wearing the mask.
And you wear that to protect your identity or to protect from gas?
I think both. Yeah, yeah.
And so this was a young lady. Did you talk to her a little more? Do you remember else what she was talking about?
Yeah, she was really explaining to me that the protests had really gone beyond the extradition question. It was really about fighting for democracy.
Right. And you had asked several of them about why you're protesting.
Yeah.
And so you brought back some sound about that.
Yeah.
And so why don't we listen to that? And this was basically to your question is why are you protesting? But this is back in August, and so I guess things have gotten even
Yeah,
worse.
Ken
But
will let us know for sure.
Let's hear what they said.
I feel like this is like an ongoing war, maybe like ongoing war towards the government, and I think it's important that people like try their best to like voice out their opinion, and even if just like coming out to protest or whatever we are doing, it's important to like show our concern, like show our voice to let the government know like this is not the way to do things. Like we Hong Kong people are not we are not just gonna sit there and let you like butcher our freedom, like to do what you think the China government please, because we are the reason why they employed. Like they should be answering to our opinion and not like just doing everything to please the Chinese government.
Because I think this bill is not good to anyone. Yes.
Why?
It hurt the freedom of Hong Kong. So I think it's very important to us, for every Hong Kong people, to stand out. Yes.
If we're not coming out, then we're gonna have no future for Hong Kong. It's all or nothing. Oh yeah, I found what I wanna say. Okay, that's what I wanna say. So that's why
That's a good phrase.
Yeah. I think most of the Hong Kong people think like this too, in this way too.
I also asked these young people how their parents felt about them protesting and what might be a dangerous situation. And so we'll include that answer at the end of the episode.
Right. What do you think their parents would be saying? You're a child of Hong Kongers.
Well, it depends. The spectrum of political beliefs in Hong Kong is also wide. I would say the majority of Hong Kongers, even the grown-ups, are understanding what's going on, and they would like the governments to back down. But there's still a good portion of parents or maybe the elderlies of Hong Kong just uses their 70s and 80s mindset to look at the current world and think that, everything is still fine. Let's just go back to work, go back to school, and just go on to your daily lives and stop protesting. What's the point of it anyway? So there will be that kind of mentality for some
Just
parents.
ignore that country behind the curtain over there. Just ignore what they're doing.
Yeah, that is definitely a good percentage of people that will think like that. Maybe 20% or so. But one thing I have to add is that we talked about the extradition law, which is how it started the protest on June 9th. And then we're talking about the end goal, which is having true democracy, which is a universal suffrage for not just the so-called the chief executive of Hong Kong, think of that as the mayor of Hong Kong, but also the entire legislative council. What we're missing in the middle is to have an independent investigation of the police extreme use of violence, because they have no accountability right now. Hong Kong has become a police state. It's not acting like a police state. It is a police state as of today.
Is there a free press there?
The press is definitely being bought out by CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. There are a few media left that are remaining with the free status, like Apple Daily News and Stand News of Hong Kong.
Are they in danger?
They are in danger. Obviously, they will try to find ways to prosecute them, and the chief executive of Hong Kong will make announcements on a daily basis, be like, oh, look, here's the front page ad for the Apple Daily News, in a sense to tell people to threaten these businesses as to, look, you are placing ads on the free newspaper, you're going to be gone after by the Chinese government.
This is Carrie Lam.
Yes.
Do Hong Kongers get Western news?
Yes.
Is it an open internet?
Oh, absolutely.
So they have access to it, unlike mainland China.
What you said is correct. As of now, that is still true. But can they shut down the internet at any point? Maybe they will. And so we need to also focus in terms of the police use of violence and how extreme that is, because I don't think a lot of American viewers really realize what they see is the images of the protests, maybe throwing the tear gas by the police, and protesters maybe throwing Molotov cocktails.
That was one of my questions to you is, right, what's the misconceptions that you see here? Because I know that so many people, when I said I was going to go, they were like, oh my gosh, it's going to be so dangerous. And in fact, it was these white T-shirt thugs that the police had hired to fight against the protesters that seemed to me to be the biggest threat.
I wouldn't say the police hired them, but they definitely collaborated.
Okay.
They're probably hired by pro-Beijing groups and it's behind the scenes. So yes, that is happening on July 21st, the Yuan Long incident in the northwestern part of Hong Kong. Just imagine this, right? You go to a rally in New York, let's just say you're anti-Trump, just make believe, and then you take a train to Brooklyn, and suddenly a group of may not be supporters of Trump, but it can be people that are bought out by that propaganda. We start beating it up randomly, and the police are disappearing for 39 minutes. You call the equivalent 9/11, right, in Hong Kong, no one picks up the phone. Or they will pick up the phone and say, well, if you think the situation is still dangerous, you should just stay home.
Or or go away from there.
Or but they're not just beating up protesters. They're dressing in black. They are people that just got off work, right? With kids and pregnant women getting beat up as well.
Wow.
Like, it was not even targeting anybody, just randomly beating people.
That's amazing.
And we've
and-
gotten some of that news, but Aline, I think your question is really great. It's like, what are the misconceptions we in the West have about what is going on over there? Is there something that we don't know that we should know?
Right. There is allegedly many cases of murder of the protesters, and I'm not sure if this is actually on the Western news that much, but we have many videos and incidents that shows that, first of all, the police officers in Hong Kong, right, whether the riot police or regular police officers, they don't have the IDs being shown anymore. They don't have the badge number with them. So there's no way for you to find out who's actually beating it up, as the police themselves cover their own face. So they can randomly beat up people without any consequences of being prosecuted. But are they really Hong Kong cops? Or are they coming from mainland China, right? Militants from the nearby area of China dressing in Hong Kong police uniforms and start beating up Hong Kong people randomly because they have the inner hatred of Hong Kong people. They call themselves cockroaches. That is what they call Hong Kongers. These
Wow.
protesters are cockroaches. Those are the type of language that Nazi is going to say to Eastern Europeans. This is how genocide
Right.
started.
When I was there, I spoke to two girls who were holding a sign saying, if we have to show our ID, then why aren't the police having to show their warrant?
Yeah.
That's what they called it? Yeah.
They have no identification whatsoever. That's why it becomes a police state. They are above the law. No one is there to investigate police violence. And there are cases. That's why I asked Alina earlier, when did you, went to visit Hong Kong? Because on August 31st, there was an incident where one of the metro subway station called the Prince Edward Station, actually quite close to where I used to live when I was a child. They locked it down, and a lot of protesters were beaten up severely. The CCTV wasn't being released, so we don't know what happened to these protesters. They may be beaten to death right at the station.
You don't know even today?
A lot of people have gone missing, and this is why the protest is escalating with violence, is because they are asking for the truth. We have people that are missing, and then suddenly, listen to this, and you can look this up. Hopefully they have some English news that will cover this, but there are so many new weird cases of so-called suicide that's happening in Hong Kong. People that will so-called fall off building, or let's just say, put it this way, they will find bodies that is claimed to be falling off the building, and no one would even hear any loud sounds of an object falling, right, from many floors. So somehow the police is always around to clean things up, and somehow there's always this pro-Beijing media that will show up immediately, take some pictures, and go away before the free press will go by. And you won't, if you see the pictures, please look it up, Americans, is that you won't see any blood stains around the body. So what does that tell you? A previously frozen dead body that may be beat up either at the subway station or in the Sun Oak Lane. That is one of the centers that I think some of the American politicians are trying to go visit and find out what's going on down there. It's a detention center right between the border of China and Hong Kong, that they may have been tortured, and men and women, girls, getting tortured and allegedly raped repeatedly by police officers, and they will have their bodies ending up to be off some tall building and claiming to be falling off the buildings, or floating dead bodies by the river. There are firefighters that says they found more dead bodies floating in the river in the nearby ocean regions in these couple of months, more than the past 10 years they will ever see in these cases.
Wow. This is government as terrorists.
Absolutely. This is how Hong Kong people are feeling right now. And you have to think of the reason why they have to do that. Maybe they cannot even control these so-called police officers. Maybe they are really dressed up
Sure.
by Chinese militants. So to cover up the cases, if they are beating up to death, you let them fall off the building. Assuming they are falling off the building, obviously your bones will be shattered, right? Right? If they're being raped, how do you clean off the evidence? Throw them in the seawater, right? And then the dead body, if they actually show a picture and it's so sickening, that you start to see blood leaking out from a dead body that is supposedly being drowned. That doesn't happen. You know what that means? You're defrosting a pack of meat. That's why the blood is going to be leaking out. And these are the images they won't be showing in Western news because
That's true, right? I haven't heard these stories.
I haven't heard anything. I mean, we're talking about
No.
stuff we don't know about.
they are
Right.
all over the social media of Hong Kong. And people are asking right now, why are the Hong Kong police so-called so sloppy when they do these so-called cleanup jobs of murders? Perhaps that is exactly what they want to do.
They
This
want
is how they want to show
scare
the
you.
people, to scare you. You be like,
Right.
stop cleaning up the protest because you may end up in these body bags. And I really hope the individuals that you interview back in August are still alive because there's no guarantee. Thousands of people are being arrested, and we talk about they're starting to arrest kids like 5-year-old kids, 10-year-old kids being like riot charges. And that is insane
Right.
because one of the 5 demands is to remove to stop categorizing the protest as riot because once you're being charged with riot, it's 10 years prison time. That's a good part of your life. So this is why Hong Kongers are fighting so, rigidly, and we're not going to back down because.
So the
of what's going
protesters,
on.
in response to this, doubled down, and more people are coming out. Are you saying? Are you suggesting?
I'm not going to say about the numbers, but definitely they are choosing more, let's just say, unlawful tactics or tactics that you normally won't see in Hong Kong, but maybe in overseas like LA or some sort. But they will not be looting, but they will be targeting probation business now. They definitely are like they call it the decorations. That's what they use the term for. But they are basically shattering the glasses of Bank of China and maybe some restaurant chains that are pro-Chinese government, right? There are also stores that allegedly help paying for the thugs that dress up in white shirt that beats up Hong Kong protesters, and not just beating up, they're bringing knives like butcher knives that actually chop down people's like limbs and down to the bones, and these are graphic footages. You can find them if you were to search this on the internet. They are available, but you're not going to see them on CNN front page because we're all worrying about the Democratic debates and the impeachment in this country.
So this is Bar Crawl Radio at Gephardt's Beer Culture Bar. We are talking with Ken Su, a member of New York for Hong Kong, about the history of this island city-state and the recent protests. Ken, how are the actions now taking place in Hong Kong affecting Hong Kongers in New York City?
Like yourself.
Right, or overseas Hong Kongers in general.
Yeah.
I know a lot of friends, Hong Kongers friends in New York and also in America and Canada. We lose a lot of sleep, let's just say, because the follow the news is with a 12-hour difference. So during the day we go to work, but at night we watch the news and really trying to catch up with what's going on in Hong Kong. So we are really exhausted for months. It's been 4 months since that happened, and I do know people that go into the state of depression by watching so many depressing news because, as I just told you, what has been really happening in Hong Kong. This is not something that Hong Kongers are used to. We went from one of the freest city in the world to allegedly murdered and assassinated by the Hong Kong government. This is not what we grew up with. So a lot of people just couldn't take it. And they also feel that, they really want to go back to Hong Kong and join the protesters and fight alongside of them. But a lot of them, for different reasons, they really can't go back. So they feel the effortlessness, while living in the United States and, being in New York. So there are also folks like myself, yes, while I'm being really saddened by what's going on in my hometown, we try to do something about it, right, in America. Because,
So what are you doing to support each other?
right. Well, we definitely have chat groups and we trying to share news and trying to console each other what's going on. And we are hosting rallies around New York City and many cities in the world, actually, not just in US, but many European countries. Like places you would not think of, like Lithuania will have a pro-Hong Kong protest, right? And we should be fighting universal values, basic freedoms and human rights and democracy. These are the basic things that we should be fighting for. So we want Americans, let's just say New Yorkers, to hear about what really is going on with the Hong Kong protests. So we will, we have one of the biggest rally we had was on June 9th when we started in Times Square. About 2,000 people show up, and then we have a march all the way to the Chinese consulate on the West Side Highway. And we would have rallies, and we invite the politicians and speakers to come to Chinatown. We would gather in front of the Confucius Plaza around Bowery. And recently we have a rally at Astor Place, and we invited some prominent speakers, including Sharon Home of Hong Kong Democratic Council, and she was one of the person who speak at the Congress for us a couple of weeks ago. And also the famous singer Denise Ho, who is one of the few left that will be speaking out against the communist government. So, yeah. So we're trying to do events like that to not just gather Hong Kong people, but also let Americans know what is going on. And I think we can create some meaningful dialogues by doing these activities.
Yeah, and if anyone's interested, it's NY4, number 4, NY4HK.
New Yorkers for Hong Kong is a Facebook page that we have. We also just started a Twitter group, and but most of the events are going to be announced both first in Facebook and then Twitter.
Right. So
that's
NY4, number 4, HK. Right.
So Ken, what do you think's going to happen as Hong Kong moves further? Like, how hard do you think that Hong Kong can push the Chinese?
I would say that first, none of us has the crystal ball in hand. It's really hard to predict. This is a history-defining moment. It's a clash of the Western ideals with the Chinese authoritarian regime. Hong Kong is basically at the front of the two storms right now. I think ultimately Hong Kongers by themselves won't be able to stand up against the mainland Chinese alone. They definitely can use some international support, and the United States is our good allies.
But is the U.S. doing anything that you know of? Is the government, is the president supporting what Hong Kongers are doing now?
Absolutely. Let's separate Congress with our President Trump here.
Yeah.
So the Congress, actually the House of Representatives just passed 3 different acts that is in support of Hong Kong. One of the acts is the Hong Kong Human Rights and Democracy Act, and is designed to punish perpetrators that will be suppressing Hong Kongers' basic freedom and democracy. And the United States now, if that becomes the law, can freeze their U.S. assets and also deny the entry to the United States. So those, with a few clauses that comes along with the act. So definitely, right now, the House actually passed that act. I believe it was merely 3 days ago, and it's a unanimous vote.
In the House?
In the House.
So it was bipartisan?
Bipartisan, yes. So these acts were endorsed by Mitch McConnell, by Marco Rubio, Nancy Pelosi, and then we have people in Hong Kongers in the East Coast that have been talking with them since 2016. So yeah.
Right.
So this is getting some momentum. Now is with Senate right now. And with regards to President Trump, he's always flip-flopping with his comments, but he has actually said more things to support Hong Kong than President Obama had back in 2014.
Interesting.
And we do have to credit him for that. And he's trying to, at some points, tie the trade war together with the Hong Kong protests. And I think that can apply some real pressure to mainland China. I think one way to counter that is to try to hurt the Chinese government economically. And hopefully they can budge, or maybe at least trying to accept, if not all 5, some of the 5 demands of the Hong Kongers, and see if the situation can alleviate.
But do you think there's any fears? Because I know that one of the things people were telling me is that the mainland Chinese were trying to put forth the idea that America was behind the protests.
Anything bad happens to China is always the Americans doing something behind the scenes. They're used to that kind of brainwashing.
But clearly there isn't.
Clearly there isn't. I mean, how can the Americans ask 2 million people of any city to come out to protest against the government? Just do math, right?
Yeah.
I'm from the financial world. how much would you have to pay me to go out to the streets and risking being beat up and disappearing, you know,
Right.
in the middle of the night? I'm not going to do that. Pay me $10,000, let's say. Multiply that by 2 million. The U.S. will go bankrupt after a month.
Yeah.
Right.
That's not
It's-
happening.
It's, pretty,
Right.
it's pretty ludicrous.
Rather, on the other hand, what's happening is that people, real people with real strong feelings about how they want their country to be, those are the ones that are putting themselves in danger.
They are risking their lives for basic freedom and democracy. And just interesting, I want to add one note. There are pro-China protests in Hong Kong and also in New York as well. We have sources that said the pro-China protesters in New York are being paid to come out. $30 a head.
Wow.
That's how much they get, US.
Wow.
And then it's a lot cheaper than the ones in Hong Kong.